The 50-year mortgage has been making its rounds on the news circuit as the Trump administration's attempt to tackle the housing crisis. It promises lower monthly payments and easier loan qualification, which on the surface seems like exactly what we need to get people into homes. It would be easier to get the loan and easier to pay it off. But is this really a solution? And who is really poised to benefit from this? To answer this, we first need to set the stage with what the current housing crisis looks like. One main driver is that we have a housing shortage. This means there are fundamentally not enough houses. Current homeowners feel little pressure to sell, often locked in at a much more attractive mortgage rate. But more importantly, population growth has outpaced housing developments. After the 2008 financial crisis, there was a sharp decline in new home construction. And while this figure has begun to rebound, the temporary lull has caught up to us, leaving us in a present-day shortage. According to JP Morgan estimates, we are currently facing a housing shortage of about 2.8 million homes, and their projections say it will take at least 10 years to reach equilibrium again. Of course, this varies greatly by the part of the country you're talking about. For example, Texas has seen a 33% increase in their housing inventory since 2016. So why are we still seeing problems even in places where the supply has greatly increased? Well, while the shortage adds fuel, the real fire is affordability. Home prices have outpaced household income. Over the past 50 years, the median home price was about 4 times that of the median household income. With no taxes or other expenses, 4 years of work would be enough to buy a house in full. Currently, that ratio is up to 5x. This means for the average person looking to buy the average house, it's about 25% less affordable compared to the 50-year average. If we look at the share of homes that buyers can afford at different income levels, we see a sharp decrease since 2019. This disparity is most prevalent at lower income levels. Looking at someone making $75,000 a year, in 2019, they could afford about 49% of homes on the market. In 2025, that figure is down to 21%. The monthly escrow amount, which accounts for property tax and homeowners insurance, has increased about 45% since 2019. Homeownership itself and everything surrounding it has gotten disproportionately expensive. While the cost of rent has also been steadily increasing, it has been greatly outpaced by the cost to buy. Currently, it's about 40% more expensive to buy a home than it is to rent one. Now, there are a million other factors that play into this too. Private equity firms outbidding families to fuel their real estate investment trusts, general inflation and cost of living increases making it difficult to accumulate a sum large enough for a down payment, the recent infatuation with short-term rentals through Airbnb and Vrbo taking homes out of the supply. But the foundational problems are a lack of supply and a lack of affordability. The 50-year mortgage's solution to these problems is to make it easier to get approved for the loan and to make the monthly loan payment less of a burden. The 50-year mortgage promises that you will have to pay less money each month for the same home. But what's the real cost of that lower monthly payment? Well, let's look at an example. If we take a home price of $400,000 and assume a 7% interest rate with a 20% down payment, we get left with a chart that looks like this. And if we consolidate this down into the important findings, we get this. Here we can see the monthly payments for the same house at 15, 30, and 50-year mortgages. Looking at this information alone, the 50-year mortgage looks much more attractive. It's $950 cheaper per month when compared to the 15-year mortgage and $203 cheaper when compared to the 30-year mortgage. Annually, this comes out to about $11,400 extra dollars when comparing the 15-year to the 50-year, and $2,400 when comparing the 30-year to the 50-year. Now, I don't know about you, but $11,000 extra dollars a year sounds pretty sweet. But what's the price you pay for the savings? Well, if we look at the total cost over the lifetime of the loan, a 15-year mortgage will cost you $517,000 in total. A 30-year will set you back $766,000, and a 50-year will cost you a staggering $1.155 million. When it's all said and done, you end up paying 3 times as much as the face value of the home. Of that over $1 million, $835,000 of it is purely interest. This means that over the course of the loan, the bank makes over $800,000 off of you. That's double the value of the entire home in pure profit the bank is making off of you. By switching from a 50-year down to a 15-year, you end up saving $637,000. Let's look at this from another perspective and look at how much of the home you actually own. With a 50-year mortgage, after 10 years, including your down payment, you will have paid a total of $311,000. But you will only own 22.5% of your home. 20% of which came from the down payment. You will have only paid off 3.18% of the loan. Let's take another step back and look at this practically. The average first-time homebuyer in the US is now 40 years old. For the average person, you won't pay this loan off until you're 90. With an average life expectancy of 78 years old, you will die barely owning 50% of your home and still on the hook for over $300,000 in monthly payments. So, does the 50-year mortgage solve the housing crisis? Not really. It does nothing to address the shortage part of the problem. As far as affordability, it does make the monthly payments associated with homeownership less of a burden. But in totality, it makes homeownership more expensive. You end up paying a lot more money for the same home. This solution also conveniently lines the bank's pockets with interest payments and puts you as the homeowner under what is likely a lifetime of debt. Now, it's important something is done about the housing crisis. For past generations, homeownership has been one of the most reliable ways to build wealth. But the 50-year mortgage doesn't feel like a path towards homeownership. It feels more like a sleight of hand trick, where you get the illusion of paying less when in reality you're paying hundreds of thousands more for the same product. Now, after all that hating, would you believe me if I said there did exist a situation in which it might make more sense to choose the 50-year mortgage over a 15-year mortgage? This is essentially the rent versus buy argument, where some people say that the stock market has better returns than real estate and renting is cheaper than buying, so a savvy investor would rent and invest the difference for a greater return. So if we take the same $400,000 house that we've been talking about and say for the sake of example that we as the investor have $2,876.25 of disposable income to spend. Now we have two options. We could either A, choose the 15-year mortgage, spend all of our disposable income on the mortgage, and then for the remaining 35 years, invest all of that money into the stock market. Or option B, we take the 50-year mortgage, spend $1,900 on our mortgage payment each month, and then invest the $950 difference into the stock market. This is a graph I made to visualize it. Unfortunately, it was a lot more helpful in my head, but it took me a really long time, so I'm going to show you anyway. So in example A, we're investing more money per month, but for a shorter period of time, whereas for option B, we're investing less money each month, but over a longer time period. If we assume an 8% return from the stock market, after 50 years, the 50-year mortgage option would leave us with a total of $7.1 million, compared to $6.5 million from the 15-year option. So by choosing the longer mortgage, we can invest earlier and let that compound for a longer period of time. Now, this situation rests on a few huge assumptions. Firstly, we're assuming a constant 8% return in the market, which if we tweak even slightly down to 6%, it all falls apart, and the 15-year mortgage now offers a better return. Secondly, we're assuming we're willing to live well below our means. If we can afford the monthly payment on the 15-year mortgage, if we were to upgrade to a 30 or 50-year mortgage, we could afford a much nicer house. Lastly, it assumes that we have a large risk appetite. The 50-year mortgage option is inherently more risky. We're under the obligation of debt for a much longer period of time. If, for example, after 20 years we lost our job, if we had chosen the 15-year option, we could just stop investing the $2,800 and use that to cover our expenses. We have no monthly payment to worry about. If, however, we had chosen the 50-year mortgage, we would still be obligated to pay the minimum monthly payment of $1,900. So we could stop investing the extra $950, but would still be on the hook for the rest of the mortgage. So while the idea of a 50-year mortgage seems inherently wrong, it is kind of interesting that there does exist a situation in which it could make sense. However, it does rest on some pretty big assumptions. In any case, I hope you found this video interesting and informative. If you have any non-50-year mortgage solutions to the housing crisis, please leave them in the comments. I would be interested to see what people think about this. Until next time, thank you for watching.